What's up guys, it's Sanjeev from KodeKloud, and today we're going to take a look at the second part of my Loki series, and we're going to focus on getting Loki up and running in a Kubernetes cluster so we can collect logs from not only the cluster itself, but also from applications running on the cluster. So we're going to take a look at, how we're going to actually, integrate all of this within a cluster. We're then going to do a demo of us actually deploying all the necessary resources onto a Kubernetes cluster and collecting logs from a demo application. So let's go ahead and get started. So how exactly do we get logs from applications running within a Kubernetes cluster? We're going to have a couple of nodes deployed in our containers. They're going to be deployed on one of those nodes or all of those nodes. And so we're going to need to get the logs from those specific containers and those applications. How do we do that? First of all, we're going to need a Loki instance deployed. And so since we're already using Kubernetes, we can just deploy Loki right onto our Kubernetes cluster. Keep in mind, you don't actually have to have it on your Kubernetes cluster. You can have it external to Kubernetes. But I'm just letting you guys know you can install it on Kubernetes as well. And in our demo, that's exactly what we're going to do. And the same thing goes for our Grafana dashboard. You can deploy it outside of Kubernetes, or you can go ahead and just deploy it within Kubernetes since you're already utilizing Kubernetes. But the main thing that you have to do is, since all of the logs will be collected by the kubelet process within Kubernetes, you're going to need to get those logs. And how do we do that? That's the purpose of Promtail. So we're going to need to have Promtail deployed on every single node, and it's going to be responsible for collecting logs from all of the pods running on each node and forwarding those up to your Loki instance. So how do we actually get a Promtail container deployed onto every single node? We have to make use of daemon sets. That's the whole point of daemon sets, is that when you configure a daemon set, it's going to get deployed on each and every node. You add a new node, it's going to automatically deploy a Promtail container onto those nodes. So those are all the things that we need to do to get Loki and Promtail up and running within our Kubernetes cluster. And obviously we're going to have to configure it to actually scrape those logs and send them over as well. And all of these things can be quite time consuming. Getting all of this up and running is a little bit of pain. And usually whenever there's something within a Kubernetes environment that involves a lot of configuration, a lot of things that you don't necessarily want to do, usually we can utilize something like Helm, which probably already exists a chart that's going to make it very easy for us to deploy all of these things with just a couple of commands. And there is, in fact, a Loki chart that we can use to actually deploy all these things. And so a Helm chart, we're going to make use of Helm to deploy a chart that's going to configure Loki, Grafana, as well as Promtail for us. And you're going to see that it's going to really simplify the whole process. You could technically do this all manually, but I recommend you utilize a Helm chart. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we can do that. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to install the Grafana repo. And we can do that by running this command here, helm repo add Grafana, and then this URL right here. We'll run that. That's going to add the specific repo. And at this point, I'm going to do a Helm repo update. We'll let that complete. And now that we've got the repo, there's going to be several charts that we can use, but let's go ahead and just search within the repo by doing helm search repo. And then we're going to search for Loki. So we're going to see all the charts with the word Loki in it. And so you can see we've got a couple of different example ones. We got Loki, Loki Canary, distributed, Loki simple scalable, Loki stack, and then, Fluentbit and Promtail. Now, the one we're going to use is Loki stack. So this is going to deploy Loki. This is going to deploy the Grafana dashboard, as well as Promtail on all of our nodes. So that's the one we want. And obviously, you could use one of the other ones as well, but I'm going to walk you through using that specific one. Now, with any chart, I always like to see the values that we can use and customize. So to do that, we can do Helm show values, and then we'll say Grafana / Loki -stack. And I'm going to just pipe this to a file so I can just take a look at it in my text editor, and I'll just call this values.yaml. And so now we can just peek at that values.yaml file. So I got that stored right here. I'm going to minimize my terminal. And if we take a look at this, there's a couple of things being configured. We can see the Loki configuration here. And that's exactly what we want. We don't really need to change anything here. If you do want to customize it, you can do that as well. You can see Promtail, the flag being enabled. That means that we're going to deploy Promtail as well. And the great part is it's actually going to configure all of this for us. So Promtail will automatically be configured to talk to the Loki server, and you can see the values are embedded in here. So you don't actually have to configure Promtail. It's going to automatically connect to Loki. Fluent bit, we don't need that. Grafana, we do want that, but in this Helm chart, the default is set to false. So I'm going to change this to true, and that's going to enable Grafana for us. And the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the tag. This default version was a little bit old for my taste. So I'm just going to do latest. So just we can grab the latest version of Grafana, but you could specify a specific version if you'd like. So after we've got that completed, go ahead and save this, and then we'll pull back the terminal. And what we're going to do is we're going to now install that Helm chart. So I'm going to do Helm install, and I'm going to pass in the values.yaml file. So I'm going to do -- values, and then we'll do values. No, it's going to be values.yaml. And then we're going to name this, we'll call this Loki. And we want the Grafana / Loki stack. That was the name of the Helm chart. All right, and so now we can see Loki stack has been deployed to your cluster. You can now add Loki to your data source in Grafana. So that means it's most likely been deployed with no issues. So now let's go ahead and clear this. And I'm going to maximize this for you guys, and we don't need this at the moment. And I'm going to do a kubectl get pods. So let's go ahead and take a look at everything that was deployed by the Helm chart. And I'll do a get all. And so if we take a look at this, we can see a couple of things. So first of all, we've got 3 pods that are deployed. And actually, before we even get to the pods, let's actually go down here first. We can take a look at deployments. So we can see there's a Grafana deployment, and that's going to generate the 1 Grafana pod here. And then we have the replica set that's going to be part of the deployment as well. But the daemon set, we have Loki Promtail, so that's going to make sure that a Promtail container gets deployed onto every single node. I have a single node cluster. I'm just using Minikube, so we've got 1 Promtail running on that 1 node. We've got the respective services for all of those as well. And that's about it. So it's just going to deploy those 3 things. And we also have Loki here as well. So that's going to be part of a stateful set. And so that's going to generate this specific pod. So really nothing too complex. But the great part is all of these things are going to be configured. So when we log into Grafana, we're already going to have Loki added as a data source. So it did all of that for us, and it really simplified this whole process so you don't have to go in and configure it. Now, at the moment, all of the services are cluster IP, so you can go in and change them, or you can set up a ingress so that you can connect to one of these cluster IP services. But we're not going to do that because I just want to focus on working with Loki and Grafana. So I'm just going to set up a port forward so that we can actually connect to our Grafana instance and test to see if everything's up and running and working. I'll clear this out, and I'm going to do the command. Actually, let me do kubectl get pod real quick. Okay, and then I'm going to do kubectl port - forward, and then I'll do pod / and then we'll specify the Grafana pod. And you can pick any port that you want to connect to on. I'm just going to do port 3000, and that's because the Grafana container is also listening on port 3000, so I just say 3000. So remember, this is going to be what the container is listening on, and this is what you want to send the request to on your local machine. So I'm just going to pick the same 2, but you could choose different values if you'd like. All right, and so now we should be able to connect to our Grafana instance. So I'm going to go to localhost :3000. And you can see that it's going to prompt us for a username and password. So what are the username and what is the password? Well, we're going to have to actually take a look at some secrets that also got deployed for us when we deployed the Helm chart. So to get the password, the default username is going to be admin, but we have to get the password. We're going to have to pull up a secret. So I'm going to open up another terminal. And we're going to take a look at the secrets that are actually deployed by the Helm chart. So I'll do kubectl get secret. All right, and we've got a whole bunch of secrets, but we want to focus on Loki - Grafana right here. So I'll do kubectl describe secret, and then Loki - Grafana. And here we've got the admin user, admin password. So let's go ahead and decode this value so we can figure out what the admin password is. And to do that, we'll do kubectl get secret. And then it's going to be Loki-Grafana. Then we'll do a -o JSON path equals, and then here we're going to say .data. So we're going to grab this data property, and then we'll do dot, and then we'll do admin -password. Close that, and then we'll do pipe base 64 -decode. So that's going to decode it. If we don't do base 64, right, this is just going to give us the, and what happened here? It misspelled it. So that's the decoded value. That's the encoded value. So then if I do base 64 -decode, we'll then be able to get the password of the token. So we can just copy this. Now, if we go back to the dashboard, I'm going to zoom in for you guys, and we'll do admin, and then we paste that value in. And there you go. We're now connected to our Grafana instance. And the awesome part about this is if we go here and we go to connections and we go to data sources, take a look at this. Loki has already been configured. So we didn't even have to configure that because the Helm chart deployed it. It automatically configured Loki, and we already have it as a data source. And so now I can just go to explore, and we can just verify that we're able to get logs when we run a query. So what I'm going to do is we'll just select the label, and we can see a couple of different labels. And here we've got app, component, file name, instance, job, namespace, node. So it's already collecting some data, but if we select, maybe we want to see logs for specific pods, and then we'll see all of the pods that are sending logs to us. And so we've got obviously the etcd server, we've got the kube API, kube controller. So most of these are just the system pods that need to run so that Kubernetes works. But then we also see Loki instance, we see the Grafana instance, and the Promtail instance. So if I select cd mini, I can select run query, and we can take a look and see all of the logs that our etcd pod is generating for us. And you can see the respective labels on that. So you'll see the node name it's coming from, the namespace. We've got the actual scrape job in the Promtail configuration, the file name that it's actually pulling this from. So usually the logs are going to be stored in var log pods, and then the name of the pod, and then the name of the container. So it attached a couple of labels for us, and it's already transmitting logs for us. And if we want to, we can also select, we can add in extra labels. We can query and filter them any way you'd like, but this is how we can set everything up so that we're already pulling all of the logs from our containers and our pods in a Kubernetes environment. So let's actually poke around and take a look at the Promtail configurations to see what exactly the default configs look like. So I'm going to do kubectl get pods, and I'll do a kubectl get secrets. Not get secret. We'll describe pod, and then we'll take a look at the Promtail pod. And if we take a look at this, we can see all of the different mounts. We've got fc Promtail, so that's coming from config. We've got some varlib docker, varlog pods, okay, but this is going to be the configuration /etc Promtail. So that's coming from config. So if we take a look at that volume config, that's coming from a secret named Loki Promtail. So if we want to take a look at the configuration, we're going to have to take a look at the secret. So we'll do kubectl get secret. And here we've got Loki Promtail. And if I do kubectl describe secret, we could see a promtail.yaml file, but it's encoded, so we're going to have to decode it. And so we can just do the same command that we ran before, essentially, but just change it for that promtail.yaml file. So I'll do kubectl get secret. I already forgot the name of the secret. Okay, get secret Loki-Promtail, and then we'll do -o JSON path equals. And here we'll .data .promtail.yaml, but obviously this is the name of the file, and we don't actually want a dot because that's going to mess up JSON path. So we can escape it with a with the slash. Let's just see if that works. Okay, yep, so we get that data. And then we can just do a base 64 decode. And we can take a look at the configs. You can see here we've got the client config. So this is going to tell us where the Loki server is running. Position here, this is the scrape config. So there's really only one scrape config. It's called Kubernetes pods. And you can see there's a couple of things happening here. Kubernetes service discovery. So this is going to find all the different services and endpoints for us so that we can actually scrape all the logs. And then it's going to do some things when it comes to relabeling labels and things like that for our logs, which a little too advanced for this demo, but we can see that we've already got some base configuration that's doing most of the heavy lifting for us. And that's why we already get all of the logs within Grafana. But let's go ahead and deploy a new application and see if the logs automatically get sent to Loki. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this app-deployment.yaml. And I'm going to just paste the deployment config. So this is a standard deployment, but you can see here, we're going to give it a name of API. It's going to have a label of app API. And the image that we're going to use is going to be from the KodeKloud Docker Hub. And you guys can use this as well. So just do KodeKloud/Loki-demo. It's just going to be a dummy container that just generates random logs for us. And we've got a couple of limits, but that's all it's going to deploy. So we'll go ahead and save that. And I can just do a kubectl apply -f app-deployment. So we'll give that a few seconds, and I'll do a kubectl get pods. Let's make sure it's up and running. And we can see we've got our API. And now let's go to Grafana and see if it's sending logs to Grafana. All right, so back in Grafana, I'm going to select pod. Let me actually delete all of this. I'm going to select pod. And then let's see if we've got our pod listed in there. And it looks like there's some issue happening. Let me just clear that out and start this from scratch. So pod. And then now we've got our API pod. I can select run query, and we can see we are in fact getting logs. So these logs are meant to mimic like a REST API. So you can see here it's got what is the method of the request, what's the route/user, we got the code. It's just dummy data, but it confirms that we are in fact pulling logs from our container, and we didn't have to do anything because Promtail has already been set up to actually get those logs and send it to Loki. Now, one of the things I don't like is that, let's say that hypothetically, you as a person, as the person setting up logging, you see your logs and you say, okay, what if I want the method and the route, or maybe the method and the code, the status code, to be labels? Because right now they're not. It's just text in there. Now, we can always search for it. If I go to code here and just say, maybe I want code, or maybe I want to search for a specific route/users, then we can always do that, and it's going to pull that up. But maybe we want it as labels so that we can actually just index on it and search for it using labels. And so the way to do that is we're going to actually have to change the Promtail configuration to accomplish that. So I want to make sure you guys take a look at the structure of the logs, because we're going to have to understand this to be able to add these properties as labels for Loki. And so the way it is we have this JSON object, and within this JSON object, we've got a log property. And then within the log property, we need to pull out our code and then our method. So remember, we got to go in log and then grab code and then method. So let's take a look and see how we do that. So once again, we need to get the Promtail configuration. And if I just hit the up arrow, we'll just run this command to get the configuration from that secret. And what I'm going to do is this time I'm going to pipe it to a file. So I'll just call this promtail.yaml. All right, so we've got promtail.yaml. This is going to be all of the configs. Now, under pipeline stages, this is where we're actually going to modify it so that we can grab data from the log message and add it as a label. And so the way we're going to do that is under here, we're going to add a new stage under the pipeline stages, and it's called match. So we're going to match. So we want to match on our specific container or our pod. So I'll do selector. And here I'm going to do quotations. And then here I'm going to pass in the key value pair of the label that's used to match on those pods. So the label here is going to be app API. So I'll say app equals API. So it needs to be in this format. And then after here, we're going to specify stages. And we'll go under here and we'll do a JSON. And now we have to go into the JSON expression and pull out the values that we want. Now remember, the logs are structured like this. So there's a log property, and then within the log property, we want method and code. So within JSON, I'm going to say expressions, and we're going to grab log. And then we'll do another JSON here. And we'll say expressions. Or before we do that, we'll say source. This is going to come from log. So this first one grabs the log property or the log object. Then within log, what we want is to grab a couple of properties. So we do expressions and we say, okay, I want code. So this is going to grab whatever the code is and store it in code. You can call it whatever you'd like. And then method. So now we've got code and method, and we can now add these as labels. So we just add another stage, this time called labels. And we say code, we're going to add code and method. And that's all we have to do. So this is just going through and parsing out our log and grabbing the code and method, and we're going to add those as labels. That's all it's really doing. Nothing too complex. And once that's done, I'm going to save the file, and we're going to update the secret now. So I'll do a kubectl get secret, and then we're going to just delete this secret. And that's Loki-Promtail. And then I'll do a kubectl create secret generic, call it the same thing. And then this time we'll do -from-file equals, and then we'll get that promtail.yaml. All right, so the secret's been created. Now the pod is still going to be using the old secret, so I'm just going to go in and delete the pod. So it's going to pull the new secret. And we'll give that a few seconds to get up and running. And we can see now that it's now up and running. So let's go ahead and go back to Grafana and see if those properties are now added as labels. All right, so back over in Grafana, I'm going to clear out this search right here. Don't need that anymore. And I'm going to just run this query. And now, if we take a look, we can see that the code, the status code of the API request is now a label, and so is the method. So we got the code and the method, which means we are successfully able to extract those properties and store them as labels. And now if I wanted to, I can actually, I'm going to go back to the builder and I can add in, let's say, okay, I want, what is the code? And I want anything with a 200. And now we can see all the logs that are going to have that specific, from that pod, any log that has a code of 200. So now those are added as labels. And Promtail, simple as that, actually. So that's going to wrap things up for this video. We got a chance to deploy Loki, Grafana, and Promtail onto a Kubernetes cluster using a Helm chart, and we were able to see how we can collect logs from our application as well as customize it so that we can actually extract data and fields from a specific log message and attach it as a label so that Loki can use it to actually index on. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.